Well, what does driving through a dirt road in the forest and a submarine have in common? Stay tuned. Well, here we are again on Western Port Bay, and just around the corner from HMAS Cerberus is the former Royal Australian Navy submarine HMAS Otama. Otama was commissioned into the Australian Navy in 1978 and was housed at HMAS Platypus on its maiden voyage to Australia. It passed through Mexico, USA and a couple of European countries. The submarine during the mid-80s was routinely used for spy missions against the Soviet Union and also China. That is widely populated in various forms of media. It housed about 60 people, 56 sailors and 8 officers, so just over 62, 63 people, and would routinely carry around about 20 torpedoes, Mark 48 Mod 4 torpedoes, and some UJM-84 sub-harpoon missiles. The top speed of the submarine while surface was 12 knots or 22 k's an hour. When it was submerged, it could go 17 knots or 31 k's an hour. And when it was at snorkel depth, it could do about 20 kilometers an hour, which is about 11 knots. Snorkel depth is where it used to come up for air and recycle air and to use the communication equipment on board. Sadly, on the 3rd of August 1987, 2 sailors were killed aboard the submarine Otama. It left HMAS Platypus in Neutral Bay in Sydney about 9 a.m. to head out and to test a hydrophone array of equipment. Unfortunately, extreme weather forecast forced the cancellation of the test, and 2 sailors were sent into the fin area, which is the back, sorry, no, the front actually, to retrieve the equipment at about 10:20. At 10:35, the submarine prepared for diving and submerged a few minutes later. The 2 men were still inside the fin. It is believed that 2 men, realising the submarine was preparing to dive, did climb up onto the top of the bridge up the top there, or the conning tower as it's called, and try to hail down via the voice pipes, but their communication was left unnoticed. A board of inquiry did take place, and although it was recommended that action took place against 2 Navy officers in charge of the operation of the submarine at the time, no court-martialing were held, and the officers could only find one or both held solely responsible for the death, so unfortunately no action there was taken. Although based in Sydney most of its career, about 1999, it was home ported in WA at HMAS Stirling at Rockingham, Western Australia. Decommissioned out of the Australian Navy in 15th of December 2000 from memory, and it was sold to the Western Port Oberon Association in 2001, and I believe it's been sitting down here ever since. Actually no, maybe 2000, I want to say 2008, 2010 it's been sitting down here. It remains fairly intact inside. As you can see, the rust is taking place on the outside. I heard a story a couple months ago that it's going to cost about $15 million to get it up to a speed, up to a standard where it could be used to turn into a museum, but unfortunately the Australian government and also the Navy doesn't want to commit, despite the current Chief of Navy being the previous XO on board the submarine. So the latest findings on board the submarine is probably most likely going to be sold for scrap metal. Should be a real shame. If you're ever in Sydney Harbour, there's another submarine at the National Maritime Museum. It's open to the public, remains fairly intact. And if you're ever driving from Sydney to Melbourne, make sure you detour off at the Holbrook area to stop and check out the HMAS Otway, who's currently, the body of it is sitting in the ground at Holbrook, New South Wales. And with us right now is the former daughter of an engineering officer on board the Otama, a former Royal Australian Navy engineer who is nicknamed Engines, as he was such a dominant and had a commanding role in the submarine fleet as an engineering officer, former Lieutenant Commander D. We won't disclose his real name for security purposes. Daughter of Lieutenant Commander D, I believe you've been on the Otama a few times?
I have many times, as a child.
I believe you also had a school excursion.
Yes, we were lucky enough that my dad was able to get I think it was my 3rd grade class from Bradbury Primary School on board in the early 80s. Have a look around the submarine, which is very unusual, I'm told.
Yeah, no doubt. And also believe that you've been on board the submarine as it's headed out beyond their heads and dived underwater.
Yeah, for a seal test, as I recall, and what Dad was saying. We were up on the bridge and got some comms through that we needed to do a dive for a seal test, and because I was primary school age, I couldn't exactly leave me on the wharf by myself, so I got shuffled into the officer's mess, and I think I was given a book or something, and told, shh, don't tell anyone, and they went and did their exercise, and I can't say I even noticed.
Okay, and what can you tell the viewers about the unique smell that a submarine has throughout?
The greasy smell of oil and diesel. I don't know, I only smell it sometimes when my son's been working on an engine, so I'm assuming it's the smell of engines, which makes sense because that's
smell
what
of
Dad
diesel.
smelled like. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And to see the submarine down here in its present state, how do you feel about that?
I just think it's a bit sad. I think they should fix it up and honour the people that have served it, particularly the two men that lost their lives. I think it should be fixed up.
Yeah, so there's cost about $15 million it might take to fix it up. You reckon it's should jointly be the state and federal governments turning into a people museum?
Yeah, I think they should let it get this far, and it would have been able to be turned into a museum much cheaper, much earlier, much sooner.
Well, let's hope for the better future for it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Well, the daughter of former Navy Lieutenant Commander D, engineering officer on board the submarine fleet. Thanks for your time.